Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer, because we're going to immediately challenge literally everything you think you know about who falls for cults. When you hear that word cult, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, we picture someone who's super vulnerable, maybe a bit lost, or, just lacking common sense. But today, we are going to completely flip that script. We're looking at the hard, clinical data behind the psychology of high-control groups. And honestly, what the research tells us is fascinating, surprising, and just deeply humbling. Prepare to have your assumptions totally shattered here. Research consistently shows that cult members, on average, possess above-average intelligence. That's right, above average. This completely breaks the myth that these organizations prey on intellectual weakness or foolishness. It's just not true. The psychological mechanisms that make these groups so effective absolutely do not target a lack of intelligence. So if they aren't going after the weak-minded, what exactly are they targeting? Well, instead of targeting intelligence, academic research reveals a much more uncomfortable truth. These groups trap ordinary, highly capable people by targeting the most fundamentally human parts of us. They zero in on our universal need for belonging, our desire for meaning, our desperate search for certainty in a totally chaotic world, and our deep, deep craving for community. We literally all have these needs, and that is exactly what makes understanding this whole thing absolutely crucial.
Section 1. Breaking the cult myth. Moving beyond the stereotype.
So to really wrap our heads around how this works, we have to approach it as an exercise in human psychology, not an exercise in judging people who've been harmed. In fact, in the academic world, researchers actually prefer to ditch the loaded word cult altogether. Instead, they use the term high-control group. And here's the kicker. They're defined not by what they believe, but by the methods they use. You'll find them literally everywhere, across religious, political, therapeutic, and even commercial contexts. The ideology, the actual belief system itself, varies wildly from group to group, but the control mechanisms, those remain incredibly, almost frighteningly consistent.
Now, what's really interesting here is how researcher Robert Lifton basically mapped out the exact playbook used to reform thought across all these different environments. You have things like milieu control, which is basically cutting off someone's environment and communication. Then there's loading the language. This restricts complex thinking into what they call thought-terminating cliches. It's essentially using buzzwords or catchphrases designed to stop an argument dead in its tracks like a mental brick wall. Add in a strict demand for purity and enforced confession, and you've got standardized tools of psychological control. And it doesn't matter if the group is selling a spiritual awakening, a political revolution, or, a dietary supplement.
Section 2. The Recruitment Trap. Why people really join.
All right, we need to start with a highly empathetic truth. Literally nobody wakes up and purposely joins a cult. People join groups to fulfill a genuine need, and it usually kicks off with a stage called love bombing. Imagine walking into a new room or logging onto a new forum and just instantly being hit with an overwhelming tidal wave of affection and inclusion. You're made to feel uniquely seen, profoundly valued, and just instantly accepted. The group makes the recruit feel like family almost overnight. It is an incredibly intoxicating feeling to suddenly belong so deeply.
But once that massive emotional connection is established, the trap slowly begins to click shut. Step 2 is incremental commitment. The ties deepen gradually. It happens slowly, just one tiny compromise at a time. By the time the truly controlling, toxic elements of the organization actually emerge, the person is already deeply embedded. The water has slowly been brought to a boil, and they are fully invested, emotionally, socially, and often financially too.
Section 3. Engineered control. Creating a closed environment.
So once a person is inside and fully committed, the entire architecture of the group shifts from welcoming to controlling. And information control becomes absolutely fundamental. Think about it. You cannot control a person's reality if they are freely out there checking multiple sources. So members are actively discouraged from consuming outside media or maintaining relationships outside the group. This creates a closed, totally airtight information environment where the group's narrative is literally the only narrative that exists.
And naturally, this leads to a massive, rigid shift in how they view the world. Reality is fractured entirely into us, the group, the enlightened, the safe ones, versus them, the outside world, the ignorant, the dangerous ones. This intense us versus them thinking is reinforced constantly. The psychological result of this engineered environment is that eventually, engaging in any critical thinking about the group starts to feel dangerous. It feels deeply disloyal and, honestly, pointless. The mind essentially builds its own prison walls.
Section 4. The cost of leaving. Why walking away isn't easy.
It is so vital that we approach this next part with a ton of compassion. People on the outside always ask, well, why don't they just leave? But there is a massive, massive difference between the physical act of walking out a door and the psychological reality of leaving. Walking away typically means losing absolutely everything all at once. You lose your identity, your entire community, your sense of purpose, and very often your housing and your job. And most tragically, you often lose family members who remain inside. The grief associated with leaving is just profound. It is quite literally akin to bereavement. Former members aren't just mourning the loss of the group, they are mourning the version of themselves that existed within it.
So, what do former members actually need to recover? First and foremost, for sure, non-judgmental support. Victims need empathy. They do not need a lecture on why they should have known better. Second, they need access to accurate information about high-control dynamics so they can intellectually untangle what was actually done to them. And third, time. Healing from this level of deep psychological manipulation absolutely does not happen overnight.
Section 5. Beyond the cult. Everyday high-control dynamics.
Okay, now we are going to turn the mirror back onto ourselves for a second, because here is the really uncomfortable truth. You don't have to pack up and move to a compound in the woods to encounter these psychological mechanisms. They exist on a wide spectrum right here in our daily lives. You'll find them in toxic corporate cultures that try to tell you we're a family here while demanding your entire life in exchange for a paycheck. You'll see them in algorithm-driven online echo chambers demanding absolute ideological purity. You even see them in mainstream political movements steeped in intense us versus them thinking. These everyday environments are constantly claiming our loyalty using the exact same playbook.
Because of this, there are some vital gut check questions we must actively ask ourselves about literally any organization we belong to. Question 1. Does this group welcome my genuine questions? Or am I shamed and silenced for just trying to understand?
Question 2, does it actually allow me to maintain relationships outside itself? Really consider if your communities isolate you or if they encourage external grounding connections that keep you tied to the broader real world. And finally, question 3, does it treat doubt as legitimate? This is the ultimate structural test. Any group, movement, or organization that cannot tolerate these basic human inquiries deserves some incredibly careful examination. If expressing a little doubt is treated like a crime, you are very likely looking at a high-control dynamic.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a really powerful thought from the research. The people who have been harmed by high-control groups are not foolish people. They were looking for what all of us are looking for. None of us is completely immune to these mechanisms because, hey, none of us is immune to being human, right? Our best protection isn't walking around believing we're too smart to be fooled. Our absolute best defense is the humility to know our own human needs and to thoroughly understand how these mechanisms of control actually operate behind the scenes. So as you look at the groups you dedicate your own life to, I'm going to leave you with this. Are you there because you are truly free to leave? Or are you there because it's become just a little too costly to ask questions?